Welcome to Interviewing the President. Nice to meet you, George Washington.
Nice to meet you too.
Oh, okay. So, shall we get started with our interview?
Of course.
So our first question for Mr. George Washington here is, George Washington, why is Mount Vernon so important to you?
Mount Vernon is really important to me because my half-brother, who basically raised me, lived there for most of his life. And after he passed, he gave it to me. So, it reminds me of him.
Wow, that's very interesting. Our next question. Why did you include that you felt the nation shouldn't be divided into political parties in your farewell address speech?
I included this statement because the nation is strong, and when divided into political parties, it can tear us apart, influence voting, and make it more focused on the beliefs of the party opposed to the true beliefs of the candidate. We should stick together.
America.
The great.
Our third question from Mr. George Washington, right there, you know, Mr. George Washington, is, what do you feel are the qualities you represent that made you the best candidate to lead our country?
Well, to start with, I arrived at the Second Constitutional Congress meeting and was in charge of several committees involving war and preparation. There we came up with the idea for a Continental Army, and there I was chosen as the commander, a great honor.
Okay. Can you tell me about your experiences at the...
I feel I was a strong candidate because I had previously successfully led the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War. I am a trusting, honest, and loyal person who the people feel like they could rely on.
Yes, we did. Can you tell me about your experiences at the Constitutional Congress?
Well, to start with, I arrived at the Second Constitutional Congress meeting and was in charge of several committees involving war preparation. There we came up with the idea for a Continental Army, and there I was chosen as the commander.
Okay, I hear that you introduced a resolution to the House of Burgesses. What was that resolution, may I ask?
Well, sir, if you must know, the resolution was for Virginia to boycott British goods until the British Proclamation Acts of 1763, the Stamp Act of 1765, and the Townshend Acts of 1767 were repealed.
Is there anything you feel that you learned from the war?
During this war, I think I have learned that politics and war are very much the same.
Who do you feel was helpful and by your side during your presidency?
I feel like Alexander Hamilton and James Madison were people I could always count on to listen to my opinions and help me lead my country. They both agreed with me that the Articles of Confederation did not only need new amendments, but the country needed a constitution that would give the national government the authority it needed.
Did you think you were going to be reelected as President of the United States?
No, sir, I did not think I would have been reelected. I was just planning on retiring and going back to my old residence in Mount Vernon. But my country needed me, therefore I did what was needed to be done.
Did you think your presidency had an impact on this country? If so, what do you think your legacy was?
I do think that my presidency left a great deal of impact on the United States. I was the first president, and I fulfilled all of my duties in office in the most professional way possible.
Lastly, sir, what do you think was your biggest challenge you faced while in office?
I certainly do feel that America had challenges with debt from the war during my presidency. Although getting all of it paid off was hard, I found a way to do that.
Okay, that's all we have for today with Mr. George Washington.
Today on Interviewing the President, we have John Adams. Okay, with the questions. I hear you were always very bright. Will you please elaborate on that?
Well, I started school at age 6 and have been preparing to get into Harvard since then. I started off by studying arithmetic, reading, and religion. At the age of 8, I was told to begin preparing for my entrance exams to Harvard. Then at the age of 15, I was accepted into Harvard and graduated at the age of 19.
As a young man, you studied law. How did that go for you?
I studied law for quite some time, but what I feel was the most helpful was when James Putnam took me as an apprentice. I learned a lot about law from him, and I am so grateful to have had him as my mentor.
I heard you had some strong opinions after the stamp act was repealed. Do you mind sharing those with me?
Well, after this happened, I did have some doubts about the future for our country, but we managed to pull everything together, and that's all that matters.
What was one of your major cases?
I defended John Hancock in a smuggling case of wine back in 1769.
Cool. What part did you take in the First Continental Congress?
I was a delegate in the First Constitutional Congress. The purpose of the meeting was to find a way to voice our opinion to Great Britain. I was part of a grand committee that formed a statement. We spent 10 days trying to resolve these constitutional issues, but did not succeed.
In 1783, you took part in signing the Treaty of Paris. What was that?
The Treaty of Paris ended war with Great Britain and it officially recognized the 13 colonies as independent states.
In the election of 1879, you lost to George Washington. How did that feel?
It was expected for George Washington to win, so I graciously accepted vice president.
Good sportsmanship. Was there any foreign affairs you faced during your presidency?
Yes, actually there was. It was called the XYZ affair, and it was over the seizing of U.S. ships, and it led to undeclared war at sea with France.
What was something you feel that you did that helped the U.S. during your time in office?
I think that creating the U.S. Naval Forces was a good thing that helps improve and strengthen the U.S. military.
Do you think that if you had done more as president, you could have beat Thomas Jefferson?
Looking back, I do think that my presidential skills could have been more improved and I could have been more liked by the people of the United States, but I did what I thought was best for my country at the time.
Peace for all. Okay. Well, that's all the time we have today for John Adams.
Today on Interviewing the Presidents, we have Mr. Thomas Jefferson. Let's get started with the interview. You helped accomplish one of the greatest things in U.S. history. What was that?
I was the author of the Declaration of Independence.
Well, wow, that is a big accomplishment you have there.
Thank you.
Did you have any other political experience before your presidency?
Yes, during the American Revolution, I was the governor of Virginia and also served in the Virginia legislative.
Okay. What was the major accomplishment during your presidency?
I accomplished the U.S. purchase of the Louisiana Territory, which almost doubled the size of the United States.
That's big.
It was.
You were a slave owner, but back in Virginia. What happened to that after you left?
I did have to leave my home in Virginia for presidency, so I had to leave my plantation behind.
What was the issue with Tripoli during your presidency?
Tripoli declared war on the U.S. because we refused to pay tributes.
That is some unnecessary war right there.
Necessary for us, not for them.
Were there any important Supreme Court cases during your time in office?
Yes, indeed, there was. The Marbury versus Madison case, which was one of the first landmark cases. This case established the basic understanding of the judicial review.
Interesting. What was the struggle during your presidency?
One conflict I had to face was impressment issues, leading to the Embargo Act.
And what was the Embargo Act?
The Embargo Act banned U.S. ships from trading with foreign ports. Sadly, this plan did not succeed.
There was a ratification during your presidency. What was it?
During our presidency, the 12th Amendment was ratified.
And our last question is, what was the law you passed based on slavery?
I passed a law that banned slave trade in the United States.
Okay, that's all the time we have for today with Mr. Thomas Jefferson. Thanks for being on our show. And
sure thing. Today on Interviewing the President, we have James Madison. Okay. You are referred to as the father of the Constitution. Why?
I feel like that people refer to me as the father of the Constitution because I took part in writing the Constitution and wrote 29 articles of the Federalist Papers.
I heard you haven't always been involved in politics, but have had some other jobs too. Can you tell me about that?
I had a small military career, but soon learned that politics was what I enjoyed the most. The military just wasn't my thing.
What was the hardest part of making the U.S. Constitution?
The ratification of the Constitution was very hard because many people did not agree with it. In order for it to be ratified, it had to be approved by 9 out of 13 states.
Tough call. Okay. You were a Federalist. Can you explain to me exactly what a Federalist is?
A Federalist was a supporter of the Constitution who believed in a strong central government.
I know that a tax overseas was a problem in the past, but was it also a problem during your presidency?
Yes, when I was sworn into office, there were still problems with British and the French overseas that needed to be resolved.
What did you do to resolve these problems?
I tried to go to war with Great Britain, but consequently America was not ready for war and we were defeated.
What was a major conflict during your presidency?
There were quite a few conflicts, but I'd have to say that the burning of the White House was a serious problem.
What was the Treaty of Ghent?
The Treaty of Ghent was a treaty between America and Great Britain to put it into the war.
Could the Battle of New Orleans been prevented?
If we could have had better communication, I think that we did not need the Battle of New Orleans and it could have been stopped.
Do you feel that you left an impact on the country? If so, what was it?
I think I left an impact on the country because it helped put it into the fighting with Great Britain and France, and I helped write the Constitution.
Well, that's all the time we have today for James Madison. Big round of applause for being here.
Today on Interviewing the Presidents, we have Mr. James Monroe. Thank you. Okay, let's get started with the questions now. What was the Monroe Doctrine?
The Monroe Doctrine was meant to prevent European colonization.
During your presidency, you dealt with some slavery issues. What were these issues?
To solve these issues, we put the Missouri Compromise in place, and it settled issues between anti-slave and slave states. It balanced the number of slave states and non-slave states.
Did you acquire any land during your presidency?
Yes, I did. In fact, I acquired Florida, which was Spain's territory.
Did you have any political accomplishments before becoming president?
Yes, George Washington appointed me as Minister of France, and I was also Governor of Virginia.
Wow. What was the era of good feelings?
The era of good feelings began soon after I was sworn in as president. It was because we had just won the war and the nation had a new sense of pride.
Were there any financial issues during your presidency?
Yes, sadly there was, because with expansion came costs too, and there was a lot to pay off all at once.
How did you help continue westward, the expansion westward?
I helped 5 states enter the Union during my term.
Is it true that there was no opponent to run against you in your second term?
Yes, that is true. And knowing that I knew I would be reelected, I thought of more ways to improve our nation.
How do you feel the Monroe Doctrine helped?
I think the Monroe Doctrine helped by making it easier to claim land.
Okay, that's all the time we have for Mr. James Monroe today. Thank you.